What's up, guys? We're back with another show. We have a very, very special guest. We have Dr. Donala Jordan, who is a clinical psychologist.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Josh.
Thank you, thank you. He's going to be opening a practice here in Fort Smith.
That's right.
Having diversity in that industry is very key because everybody doesn't come from the same background.
That's right.
I'll tell them a little bit about myself. I was a psych major in college, and I just couldn't make sense of being in that industry because I just didn't see anybody who looked like me doing that in that field. And it kind of discouraged me, and then that's when I got into just going to business. But seeing you now, having some of that diversity in that industry, somebody who's opening their own practice, it means a lot. So I appreciate you doing that for our community.
No, thank you.
So what school did you graduate from? Graduate school, I guess.
Oh, yeah. So graduate school, it was the Minnesota School of Professional Psychology at Argosy University. I did that in altogether, I graduated in 2017.
That's a blessing.
Yeah, and undergrad here in Arkansas at the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, so an HBCU. So,
awesome.
That really propelled me on this path.
What's your leadership position in the APA? What is the APA?
Sure. So in Arkansas we have ARPA, which is the Arkansas Psychological Association, and so within ARPA, I am the chair of the Diversity Committee, which is a leadership position within our state organization. And so part of that task is to recruit other folks to, particularly graduate students, but also early career and anyone else interested in caring about issues that matter for Arkansas's diverse population.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So and that's the task, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And that being a part of this state leadership actually just allowed me to go to DC to meet other state diversity reps.
Yeah.
So,
and what were you doing on Capitol Hill? You were talking a little bit about, just kind of the eye-opening experience you had because it was so many different groups out there advocating for different things.
Yes.
And then you have to go out there
and
do the same
Absolutely.
thing. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, so I was in Washington D.C. for several days, and we were there to learn strategies about how other folks are doing with increasing their diversity programming, but also federal advocacy programming, and all around managing state psychological associations. But in addition, it's appropriations time on Capitol Hill, and so part of one of the reasons why we were there was to advocate for a few key issues relevant to psychology, but even more specifically, that could benefit psychologists in Arkansas. So I'll just make a point about one of the issues, which is Medicare. And in Medicare, there's an act, and it's called commonly known as the Physician Definition Act. Now, what this act does, it allows for folks that really aren't physicians, but let's say dentists, optometrists, chiropractors, they're included in this definition, and they're allowed to bill Medicare for a variety of services unimpeded. However, for psychologists, we're not a part of that definition.
Yeah.
And to be honest, part of the history of when this came out, psychologists chose not to have a seat at that table. But now, not knowing the unintended consequences of not having a seat at the table, Medicare is seeking to cut 7% from psychologist services from Medicare altogether. And so that's one aspect of it that we were on the Hill trying to encourage our state legislators to just really consider changing this act so that psychologists can be included in this physician definition, because Joshua, the real issue is we're here to talk. I'm able to practice independently. I don't need anyone to supervise me.
Yeah.
However, for psychologists working in hospitals, rehab centers, or nursing homes, they have to have their documents and notes signed off by by a physician. Well, that means there's some liability there because a lot of times physicians aren't trained, most of the time aren't trained in psychology. Maybe psychiatrists may have some overlap in knowledge base, but still they're not versed with what we do.
Yeah.
So because of that, psychologists are unable oftentimes to provide those services for the Medicare population in those sensitive areas of hospitals, nursing homes, or rehab centers.
Yeah, which is a big deal here. Rehab centers, and especially specifically in the River Valley. I mean, that should really hit home to a lot of people. We have a big substance abuse problem. We have a lot of, we have kids in the foster care system. These are all people who need your services. We have a big epidemic here with that.
Right.
So he's advocating on Capitol Hill to be able to give more funding, more flexibility to these psychologists and these clients who need to come in and see you guys and use your services, but they may not be able to. People don't get out there and mow. And if people like Dr. Donala Jordan, if they don't go up to Capitol Hill and advocate for these things, we may be in a worse position later on. We may not see it today, but later on down the line, we may see some things if we don't go out there and do that.
Particularly because the beneficiaries of Medicare are typically older individuals or people with chronic medical conditions or chronically mentally ill. And those are very vulnerable populations. And we have skill sets that really attend to the behavior aspects of those things. And if we're not in those areas and able to function independently to treat that, it just sort of
just limits you a little bit.
Limits us a little bit, but also delays the treatment that we know exists that can help.
So we if you haven't gotten the vibe from Dr. Jordan, he knows his stuff, and he's not just focused on his practice, but also our community, our state, and the people within it. So how did you get into psychology, and what gave you the nerve to say, I'm going to be one of the very few, if not the only, African American clinical psychologists who have their own firm and their own practice? What gave you the first idea to get into psychology, and second, what gave you the audacity to think that you can pull this off?
I know, right? Well, a couple of things. I had some early life events that sort of sensitized me to differences. So, for example, I grew up in the United Methodist Church in eastern Arkansas, where I'm from, and I would go to church camps. And at those church camps, I was oftentimes, me and my cousin, we were oftentimes one of the only or a handful of blacks at those camps, because United Methodist Church predominantly is a white sort of denomination. But it's Eastern Arkansas, so it's it's white and black. But all that being said, we would have these dinners like that. I mean, I'm like 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm away from home, I'm around a lot of other folks that don't look like me, but also other folks that had different abilities than me. So we would have silent dinners, and we would have to learn rudimentary sign language just to communicate with each other. Or for our peers that had used a wheelchair, we learned how to use the wheelchair lift to help them in and out of the pool. So that sensitized me very early on, and I still consider myself an artist. That's my love or passion, so to speak. I don't know. But I studied art originally at the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, and while there doing work study, I came across this book. It's called The Art for the Exceptional Child. And in that book, it was a blend of art and psychology. It was a juncture that I hadn't really considered before. And I said, this is a way to make art seemingly more meaningful. That's the way I interpreted it. Although it was used to help people, but it was in a more meaningful way instead of art for art's sake. And I'm okay with art for art's sake as well. But for me, that was a catalyst to kind of add more substance to how I wanted to approach helping. And I was like, psychology is interesting. So I took a general psych class, got hooked, and then essentially the rest was a long history. And from there, I met my wife at the Arkansas State Hospital. that Rihanna song, Found Love in a Hopeless Place. We met there. But while there, though, what was important, while I was at the Arkansas State Hospital, I started this art program for the patients because it's a 24-hour lockdown place. And so because of my art background and my understanding of both art and psychology, I use art therapeutically with these folks at the Arkansas State Hospital, and ultimately got some grant funding from the Fiore Foundation, who happens to be an Arkansas Fort Smith family.
Yeah.
And they provided grant funding, and what I did with that funding was, one, bought art supplies because they're expensive, and two, used the monies to buy frames and frame the art really nicely. So we invited the community to come to the Arkansas State Hospital and look at the patient's art. And when the art sold, the patient received 100% of the proceeds. So it was a remarkable time. I did this for 3 years. Not only did I invite the community in Little Rock to the Arkansas State Hospital,
Yeah.
I was able to take the art out into the community. So, for example, Boswell Moreau Fine Art Gallery in Little Rock, Arkansas, and the Lehman Library system in North Little Rock. They had exhibitions for the artwork, and it was remarkable.
Yeah.
And so all of those culminating experiences continue to contribute to my audacity to say, what more can I do?
Yeah.
And I knew, working at the hospital as long as I had, and knowing that that's such a vulnerable population, I had to get trained at the highest level in order to have a seat at the table to be able to affect change from the top down.
Yeah.
And that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. So you had to go through. You did a lot. You know, you took a passion from art that kind of sparked a interest in you for psychology.
Mm-hmm.
Merge a very big passion of yours
Mm-hmm.
into an interest that you just kind of thought you were interested in. Merge the two. And it sounds like you kind of made a business out of it. That's awesome.
Yeah,
I'm happy for you, man.
Thank you very much.
So what's your practice that you're bringing to Fort Smith? When is that practice opening? And what kind of things are you going to be focusing on at your own practice? Now that you've done everything at the high level, you've done the art, you've done the merge of art with psychology. When do you open your practice, and what do you want to focus on there?
So, Joshua, I want to be useful to the community, and part of me wanting to be useful to this community, not only the Black community, but Fort Smith community altogether, because there are few psychologists in private practice here as well. So,
period. Let alone having diversity in
exactly,
that space.
Exactly. And so I'm going to open up to do therapy, and I'm going to open up to do some consultations. So taking psychology into the community. So I'll be open to doing that, and I'm going to be doing some psychological testing. It's not automatic, but because I am African American, and I do understand, particularly for African American community, there has to be a little bit of some extra cultural consideration when using psychological testing. I have that training and experience, but by and large, I'm going to do some general psych testing, pre-surgical evaluations for bariatric surgeries, such as essentially a clearance, and then I'll probably do some adult ADHD testing as well. And just depending on what the need is, I may do some other things too.
Yeah. Just kind of let it evolve on its own.
Yes.
That's one thing I had to learn with my business is, when I started in real estate, I wanted to just sell apartment complexes.
Okay.
That's kind of my passion, just selling apartments. But at the end of the day, how many apartment complexes are going to sell around here? You kind of have to allow the market to evolve. And I think that you being trained at the highest level, in a hospital, it didn't get any more intense than that. You being able to come down to a community that really, really needs diversity, because we're a very diverse community. And, even me being a kid going to therapy, I couldn't even sit in front of my therapist because they couldn't understand the things I was going through, because they don't know where I'm from. They didn't live the same life as me, and they had some of the same experiences. So I think that's great.
No, I appreciate you saying that, and therapy in the African American community, I think it's useful, and I think some people are open to it. I hope more are become open to it. Um, However, our cultural mistrust of the healthcare system isn't unfounded. And I remember even growing up in eastern Arkansas, um, the stories about Tuskegee still being handed down, like in the 80s and 90s. I mean, that cultural mistrust, is still prevalent. However, things have markedly improved, and I say old habits die hard, but I'm a living example that things have changed.
Yeah. So if you had to give somebody, because I know we probably can both dive deep into this, but I know you probably get really passionate about it. Really quickly, as we wrap this up, why is mental health so important? Why should people seek, an outside, person to kind of get in, join in with them and not have them go through it alone? Why do you think that's so important?
One, I think that's a terrific question, and I'll try to be as concise as possible.
Because I know we can go on for 30, 45 minutes to talk about it.
That is a deep dive. Couple things that come to mind more immediately. One, I'm not your friend as a therapist, but I'm also not an enemy.
Yeah.
I'm there to not completely just be a mirror, but talk to you in an informed and guided way that's aimed at helping improve your well-being. That's the whole point. I'm there to help you improve. And if there are aspects of behavior that is inconsistent with what you say you want to do, well, let's talk about how you can fix that and eliminate that and do what you want to do. Another second thing that comes to mind, because of out of the top 10 chronic health conditions, there's a behavioral component to about 7 of them. So you think about type 2 diabetes. Well, that has to do with eating behaviors.
Yeah.
You think about obesity. That has to do with sedentary behavior. So it's really human behavior that I can assist with, that can help modify your physical well-being, which in turn can modify your mental well-being, or modify your mental well-being that will in turn modify your physical well-being.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's important.
I think a lot of people, they think when they think of therapy, they think, man, only crazy people go to therapy. But no, I think, although I need to practice what I preach as well, because we all do that. We got all the answers, but we sometimes can't practice what we preach.
Absolutely.
You really opened my eyes up about different reasons why somebody would go to therapy. Because I thought, just maybe you're having some, some financial issues or relationship issues, whatever, and trying to cope with that. But obesity, diabetes, a lot of things that you need to, a lot of different reasons why somebody may go to a therapist. So that has opened my eyes up a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, well, everybody, I appreciate you guys for tuning in. When are you opening your doors?
So, my wife said it's April 1st. I just said April, but my wife said April 1st. So it's going to be April 1st.
Yeah.
So I'm moving frantically to get everything in place, but I'll be ready.
Awesome. So open April 1st. How can people get in contact with you?
So on April 1st, the website will launch. I do have the website, but it's not active yet, but it'll be ready to launch on that date, and I'll have a contact information at that time. So the website will be www.jordancps.com.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you so much. I appreciate the things you're trying to do in our community.
Absolutely.
You're going to be very successful. You're going to have our support, okay?
I appreciate it. I think I found a friend in you, and I'm glad to meet another professional colleague, so I appreciate that.
Anything you need, come to us. We appreciate you.